Hey guys, how's it going? Today I wanted to do another Leetcode problem. I know we haven't done one in a while, and I wanted to make sure that doing these Leetcode problems is kind of like training, right? As weightlifters, they lift like heavy weights. It's good for us to dive into these problems, whether they be easy, medium, or hard. It's just good to review them every now and then. It'll keep you sharp. Anyways, without further ado, we're going to go and dive into a problem called reverse only letters. Now, this one doesn't require any specific data structures or algorithms, but it does kind of, it will kind of require you to think a little bit on how to do it. So let's go ahead and read the problem. So, given a string S, return the reversed string where all characters that are not a letter stay in the same place and all letters reverse their positions. So essentially alphabet, lowercase and uppercase need to switch. So how would you guys go about this? Pause the video, think about it real quick. When I see this problem, I immediately think of a few things that I need. I need a way to find if the letter that I'm looking at right now is an alphabet, right? Lowercase or uppercase. One of the easiest ways to do this in most programming languages is to use something called Regx. Now, Regx stands for regular expressions, and it's essentially a pattern matching mechanism, and JavaScript has native support for this. So the first thing we should do is write kind of a separate utility function. Let's call it const is valid string, for example. And I'm just doing an anonymous function here, and let's pass in a string, and here we're going to write a simple regex. Now, regex is kind of tricky to write if you're not really familiar with it. I myself have to look it up quite frequently for complex regex, but generally there's two ways to do it in JavaScript. One, you could do new regex, which is like making a class. The other shorthand way to do it is signaling with these two slashes saying that this is a regex, and then you do a caret to say this is basically you're going to give it a pattern, right? So in here we're going to do A through Z and then A through capital Z, and basically this is saying this regex needs to start with one of these patterns. So the two patterns that we gave it was A through Z all lowercase and A through Z all uppercase. And then the next thing we need to do is we have to end it with a $sign, but if we do plus, we just say one or more. There's, I believe, star, which is there's like exact. You could make it so that it's exact matching, or but what we want is this string that we see needs to be at least one of a character, and it shouldn't have anything else. So this is the regex, and then the regex has a built-in function called test, and then we just pass it the string, and here we could just return it. Now that's the first part. We know that we're going to need this because the thought is we're going to essentially traverse this string, and every time there is a valid string, we're going to swap it. Now, one thing that you should think about here is how do you keep track of what values to swap, right? And the best way to do this is by having pointers. Now, oftentimes these programming problems, they'll deal with pointers, and it's because pointers can be kind of tricky if you're not careful with it, and it's just one of those fundamental things, being able to manipulate pointers. And this problem is one of those problems that will use pointers heavily. So what I mean by that is if you think about this problem, let's take this input string right here. I'll just put it right here. I'll just put a comment here. If you say, hey, let's take a starting index. So let's just say let's start from 0, so that would be A, and then let's also start from end, which would be like the string dot length minus 0, for example, which would be 0, right? So if you have like a loop that checks one end to the other end, and if they are a string in both cases and you swap them in place, and then you continue doing that until you meet in the middle, then you essentially have traversed through the entire string and looked at all of the strings that needed to be swapped. So that's essentially what we're going to be doing here. Right here, the only thing I'm going to do to make my life a little bit easier is to make this raw string into an array. So let's just say let our string array equals s.split, and split is just a utility function. And here I'm just going to change this to s*arm. I'm going to do a while loop here, and in here all I'm going to do is if start is less than end, and this has to be -1, sorry. So essentially what I'm saying is if the start, as long as the start is less than the end, then I have not crossed over, meaning I'm still part of the traversal. I'm still looking through all of the characters that I need to swap. So that's the first check. Now in this check, there's a few things that I need to do. I'll just pseudocode it real quick here. The first thing I need to do is if the current start character and the is current end character or something like that is valid, then I need to essentially swap and then increment slash decrement start and end respectively. That's one case. The other case is if current start character, for example, current start character is not a valid string, then I just skip over it. And this would be likewise for current end, right? So essentially the idea is that when I have no way to know that both, I basically have to only swap them if they're the same letters. In the current and then the end is both letters, but if one of them is like a hyphen or some other character, I just skip over it. And then essentially it will catch up on the next while loop. So let's go ahead and code this out. Let's go ahead and create a few variables here. Let's call it start letter, which would be, let's see, str and then start. And then here, let's do end letter. And then here, we'll do end. Now, the next thing we want to do is let's go ahead and evaluate whether the current letter that we're on for both start and end is a valid string. So let's just say is start current start valid. It's kind of a long, is current start valid. It's kind of a long name, but long names are generally okay. Let's see, and then let's call our utility function is valid string right here, and we're going to pass it the start letter, and we'll do the same for the end letter, and then we'll call it is current end valid end letter. I'm not really a big fan of these. Is current start letter. Let's just say is a valid, and then let's just say is b valid. This is a little bit. Let's do s. I'm really not a fan of what I'm naming this. Let's just be kind of descriptive here. We'll just say start letter is start letter valid, and then we'll say is end letter valid. It's kind of longer, but that's fine. So the first that took forever to name those two variables, but basically what I need to now do is check if both of these letters happen to be valid letters. then I need to swap them in place, right? So we'll do a simple is start letter valid and is end letter valid. Then we will go ahead and swap the two letters in place. So R, and then this will be start equals essentially, and we luckily pulled them out here, so we could, just do that as well. String array end equals start letter. So we've essentially swapped them in place. Now we have done this swap, we have to make sure to increment and decrement the start accordingly. Start plus equals 1, and then end minus equals 1. Great. Now we have to take care of the cases where essentially they're not valid, and we need to increment and decrement properly. So if is start letter valid, and then we just have to do the not, which is the opposite. Then we need to make sure to decrement the start, and if not is end letter valid, we need to also make sure to decrement the end. So that's essentially our loop, and this should go through the entire length of the string. It'll take half the time of linear time to go through this, right? Because we're going through the length of the string divided by half, because we're looking at two string letters at the same time. And all I need to do here is, assuming that this takes care of all of our little swappings in place, we just have to return strArray.join. So now this is a little bit like turning this into an array is a little bit slower for performance, but just working with arrays is a little bit faster when I'm swapping things. If not, I would have had to done like some kind of splice or like sub string, like that's just like more cumbersome. I just did this for simplicity. So let's go ahead and run this, see if I made any errors. And DCBA, so it looks like it's the same output, so let's go ahead and submit it. And there you go, it's I have successfully submitted it. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this quick video on Leetcode problems. I'm trying to crank out these more and more because I really love doing Leetcode problems. It's just one of those things that it challenges me to, when you want to teach these kind of things, you really need to like understand the material that you're teaching. And so it's a really good way for me to review some of, like, especially for medium and above problems, it's a good way for me to review these things, since I don't get to do like simple data structures and algorithm problems on like every single day. I do run into problems here and there that requires me to traverse trees and stuff like that, and but anyways, so I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys on the next